Hello. Welcome to our first ever live episode of the Writer's Hive, discussing the best ways to improve your writing skills as a part of the Authortube Writing Conference 2022. We are very excited to have our first live Writer's Hive. All future live Writing Hive videos will be on our new Writer's Hive video, which is linked down below. But as always, I am joined by Katlyn and by Amber. I'm going to let them introduce themselves.
It's our live Writers Hive channel, which is in the description below. Hi, I'm Katlyn Duncan, and I am a multi-published hybrid author, which means I publish both traditional and self-published books. My channel here on YouTube is where I talk about the writing process and all the bookish things. I do talk about nonfiction, and also I'm moving into the thriller genre, the adult thriller genre, with my debut adult thriller, Her Buried Lives, coming in October. So yeah, I enjoy talking about everything writing and publishing, so feel free to join me over there if you're interested. And also right after this live, I'm going live sort of on my channel for the Authortube Writing Conference. It's all about writing and publishing systems. It's from anyone who is just starting off to write, or you're an advanced published author, creating systems to ensure that your business is effective and so that you can create more. So I believe Julie put that in the description as well. So feel free to join me right after this.
Hello, I'm Amber. I am an aspiring traditionally published author. I hope to go in the traditional route, but if not, then I'll look into the indie side if need be. But I'm currently drafting what I'm coining as a cozy horror about a ghost, a girl that can see ghosts. And well, she's a woman. It's an adult book, but I'm excited to just talk about, how to improve your writing, since it is something that I'm actively doing and something that I've been working on for about 4 years now, trying to really improve my writing skills.
And for you, those of you that are new here, I'm JulieZantopoulos. I'm the author of A Curse in Ash and upcoming A Prophecy in Ash in October. I am also querying an adult romance, so I've got a lot of different experiences with a lot of different genres, trying to improve my writing and my process as we go along. So if you are new to the Writer's Hive, this is a discussion-based panel. We're going to be talking about our best ways to improve our writing skills and encourage you to do the same in the comments. If you have a question, go ahead and put a Q in front of it, and we will make sure we get to those at the end of the discussion. But we're going to just chat about the ways that we have found to best improve our writing. We're going to let Katlyn start off.
Yeah, absolutely. My first tip is very much mindset, because we can talk about craft as well, but writing in itself is hard. It's hard from the beginning. I've published, I don't even know how many books I've published now, over 15, and it's always daunting when you jump in to a new book. So I know a lot of authors say, oh, I'm just waiting for something to help me start or the muse to come. And sometimes that happens, but I feel like it doesn't really. I'm also a ghostwriter as well. So that when I started ghostwriting, that sort of became a job for me. So when you go to your job, you can't just wait to feel inspired to do your work. You just have to do your work. And that's not to say you can't brainstorm or think of ideas. That's a little different than sitting there doing nothing, because thinking about your story is definitely work. Like I said, one thing that helped was my ghostwriting and writing to deadline. So it wasn't, some arbitrary deadline. It was for a client, and I had a specific amount of time to do that. So when I stretched my limits a bit, I really understood my writing process and what I needed to move forward with other projects. So I would just, I recommend, probably we're going to talk a little bit more on how to do that. But definitely, push yourself a little harder than you may want to. Push yourself out of your comfort zone, and that will definitely help you improve your skills a bit faster. And also, that's always the way we want to write books more faster. But, you know, definitely pushing yourself and not just sitting there waiting, talking about it.
I agree. In terms of that, I also had kind of the idea in my head that I've always kind of treated writing and authorship as a job. Obviously, it's not my main source of income, but I do try to make it a habit. So I think one of the best ways to, you know, improve is to treat it like it's already maybe your supplemental income, and to really try to set aside time and kind of protect that time for writing. And the more that you make that known to the people around you, the better. And we've discussed this on other Writing Hive videos, but I think that, you know, making sure that you're carving aside time to intentionally write and grow is one of the best things that you can do for yourself as an author and as a writer, is to just continuously do it. It's very hard to improve at a steady rate if you're only writing like once a month, or if you're only writing during Nano. You know, like, it's not impossible. It's absolutely doable. But the more you do something, obviously, the better you get at it. So consistency across the board when you're writing, I think, is super important.
Yeah, I agree. I also think that on the same track of that, on the writing and continuously writing, if you are just continuously writing the same thing, it might not necessarily, it will improve, but not maybe to the level that you want it. So one of my ideas of how to improve your writing is to take part in what they call the story ideas that people give out, and like the picture inspirations, the prompts. Thank you. That word just left my head. The writing prompts, whether it's somebody, you know, somebody that says, hey, here's a writing prompt, try this, or go online and find free ones. I like to go to Pinterest and find just really beautiful pictures and think of a story for that and write it outside of my normal genres, outside of my normal writing. I think that opening up, you know, you're broadening your horizons on what you're writing can really help improve and see how, like, if you go outside of the box a little bit and have to really work at this when you're used to writing one thing, it can help you to have perspective on how to make your normal writing a lot better.
Absolutely. I see a couple comments that I want to talk about because they're not necessarily questions, they're comments based on what we're talking about right now. So we're going to get to a couple of those. If you have any other thoughts, let us know. But going for walks to think about your book, being active helps you kind of think better. And I think there's a lot of people that do that, like activity and something else lets your brain kind of go, and you're able to think about your story, which is fantastic.
I find like mundane tasks as well, like cleaning my house. I tend to maybe put on some inspirational music if I'm really like stuck in my book. And then just doing something, or even going for a drive, just sort of drive to where you've been before, a place you've been before, not necessarily a new place. But when things are just like routine, I find that really helps with inspiration.
Yeah, tasks that you don't have to think about, so you have the mental capacity to kind of brainstorm and think about other things. Also, yes, it does take quite a while to become an expert. And Jenna, thank you for reminding everybody, there is a feedback form down below. You can fill that out as many times as you want for any of the conferences that you attended, or any of the sessions that you attended during the conference. And for each one, you get a chance to be entered for prizes. So that form is down below if you want to give feedback for any of the sessions that you ran on. Similarly, Amber, I think that also you talked about kind of getting outside of your comfort zone. And one of the things that I love doing in terms of prompts and things like that is flash fiction, entering different contests, you know, looking around to see what there is out there that you can join in terms of getting feedback. So there's things where you can, you know, submit for free to enter these different contests, which is always great writing practice. There's things that you can enter for, you know, a free chance for a critique on a first chapter, or so there's a lot of opportunities out there, but you have to be actively looking for a lot of them. But there is so many resources online. I use a lot of them with the kids that I nanny for to do different children's writing competitions. And it just helps you hone your craft. Sometimes there's a prompt, sometimes it's free. You can write about whatever you want. But those kinds of opportunities really usually cost you next to nothing, or maybe like a $5 entry fee. And then you're able to kind of expand your writing. And it's a good way to share your writing without too much fear involved, because especially when you're writing for a competition or for, maybe to get published or maybe a monetary prize, it's not something where you're going to get a rejection letter back, or, you weren't accepted. It's just kind of, you tried and that's great, but you're not going to have to feel that like sting. So it's a good way to kind of practice putting your writing out into the world, which can be a really scary aspect as well.
I know too that a lot of anthologies are out there for short stories. Sometimes I've seen some that are just like theme based, or maybe like location based or genre based. And if you're interested in writing in those, usually anthologies, you can get in for free. Some of them I think are paid, but usually you'll go through an editing process, which was sort of a jumping off point into one of my other points. Do you mind if I jump in with that in terms of editing? Because I think being edited is really important to honing your craft. And this can sort of go in different ways. So in terms of self-editing, there are programs such as Pro Writing Aid and Grammarly that you can use to improve your like technical writing. I have found Pro Writing Aid to be amazing for me because it has picked up on so many of my consistent mistakes, sort of like echoes and using filter words and passive voice. That's been phenomenal for growing, improving my writing, especially when it comes to getting my first draft down. And then I don't have to do as much technical stuff later on. Like over the years, I've received like better feedback saying like, this is more clean and everything like that, because I'm learning as I'm going. And then when it comes to an actual edit, which we would always recommend you have your book edited, having experience working with an editor, so say a developmental editor where they really work on story and pacing and character, you can definitely learn a lot. I know there's some wild rumor about, editors changing your book, which they really don't. They usually offer suggestions. And then you decide what you want to do with those suggestions. But usually when you hire someone, you hire them for their help. So it's definitely worth looking into. And if you find, I'm very like into data and consistency. So like if you find a consistent note from your editors, you can try to figure out like, what am I doing in my writing process? How do I write specific characters or plot or whatever it has to do with, like, what are you doing? And then improve upon it from there. And then I guess, critique partners as well, beta readers, looking at that feedback. It's so important to like be critiqued and be edited, because we're always so close to our books. And, even if you write a ton of books, having another's perspective can really help on improving your craft for future books.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I was actually going to say something about having someone look at it, someone edit it. And I think that even if you're not ready to go straight into having a professional editor and you've done as much of the self-editing as you can and you want other perspectives, the great thing about 2022 is that the internet is so prevalent and there are so many communities out there of writers that you can find. And if you find writers that you trust, you could send them an excerpt of like your writing that you feel is strong. And then maybe they send you one of theirs and you can just have like a mutual critique and you can ask them exactly what you want them to look at. Like, what do you think my sentence structure is? Do you think that I need improvement there? Like, how would you change this? Do you think the atmosphere is nice? Do you understand the character's motivation in this piece that I've sent you? And I think that just having someone else's perspective, even if it's not necessarily a professional editor and you're just not ready for that step yet, which you should always eventually do that step, it could help just having other writers, because every writer, and I've looked at both, Katlyn's work, I've looked at Julie's work, they've both looked, at my work. We all write very different things. We all write in a different way. We have different voices, and just having, Julie or Katlyn's perspective, or even some other writer friends that I have around me, it's nice to be able to see it in different eyes, because you won't necessarily be able to know that something doesn't read correctly if you don't get another person's perspective, because you know in your head what it's kind of means and what it's supposed to say. But someone else that has no idea of the backstory of what you've been thinking about for sometimes years in your head, if that character doesn't come across exactly how you want them, or that sentence structure just sounds a little bit odd or something like that. But it's definitely, it's worth it all through the board from beginning to end to have other people look at your work to help you improve it.
I agree. It's not just a matter of being close to it and sometimes having looked at it multiple times as you self-edit and go through different iterations of your draft. It's also the fact that as the creator, you understand things that a reader doesn't. So you're not always sure how you're coming off. So a big part of improving your craft is being vulnerable and sharing, and also being receptive to feedback and kind of understanding that it's not personal. It's helping you to grow as a writer. I know a lot of people kind of pause at that sharing it with others and getting feedback step because it makes them nervous, but it really is one of the best ways to improve as a writer. And I love this comment from Diana that they keep an error log to help focus on strengthening your weaknesses. So if you, again, like Kate was saying, see the same consistent things coming up as feedback all the time, you're able to kind of focus on that more. I don't have an error log. It would be very humbling to have one. I think I could probably put one together and know what would be on there, but that's a great idea. I love that idea.
Diana, I'm curious, how do you strengthen yourself? Do you look at it frequently? I'm just very curious. It sounds like a great system. I subconsciously figure, echoes and stuff is like the bane of my existence. But I would love to know how you learn from your error log, if you want to mention it in the comments.
Yeah. And then we also have one that says depersonalizing feedback is one of the reasons I use a pen name. And it helps you, at least for now, which is also completely valid. There is, a separation there when you have a pen name. Obviously, probably the people that you're getting feedback from are going to know who's sending it to them, or you could send it anonymously. But there is a certain distance that can provide from taking it super personally. While we wait to see Diana, we're not fully at the Q&A session yet. We've got a couple other tips and tricks, but Jenna did have a question that I just want to get to, and that is just that how difficult is it to bring people into our trio? Not hard at all. We are not elitist in any way, and we've definitely had guests on the show before, and we welcome that. We actually have a form at our channel. If you wanted to be a guest on our show, you can do that. There's a whole guest form if you have something fantastic that you want to talk to us about, or promote your your editing business or your cover design business, anything like that. We would love to talk to you about the process. So definitely not hard at all. And then Diana said, I'm an ELA instructor. So I go on to the same sources I send my high schoolers to, such as Khan Academy. Very good. Other grammar and writing sites.
I love that. I love Khan Academy. So I never even thought of using that for myself. Thank you for sharing.
That's great. And then there's also other things that you can use online. So much like Khan Academy, there are some paid services and also some free services that I have found really help me with my writing. One of them is One Stop for Writers, which I personally really get a lot of value out of and adore. There's different, emotional thesaurus on there, a lot of thesaurus on there, but it does help you kind of break down character motivation, different plot structures, and like the ebb and flow of stories. And this person has this past trauma and this is how they might respond to it. And it helps you kind of really dive into the meat of your characterizations, your stories, your locales. There's a lot there that is free. And then there's also a lot that is, paid options. But I have found that that's one thing that I can invest in each year that I find a lot of value in. So if you haven't tried it yet, I believe you can try it free for 2 weeks. I believe there are still free options, like things that you can still get for free regardless. But it is one of the tools that I find incredibly beneficial for strengthening my writing, because it helps me strengthen my word choice, my character development and arcs. So don't be shy about looking at the resources that are out there. A lot of people think that they have to strengthen their writing just from within. But courses, online resources, things like that are also a fantastic way that you can look at it. They're not all monetary. A lot of them you can access for free.
Also Authortube as well. There's a lot of people offering great advice. I did want to jump off of what Julie said in terms of the One Stop for Writers, where I know Julie like dove in and you love to use that website. I use it in very small capacity. I usually just use it for the thesaurus aspect, but if a cheaper option, or if you want to sort of get started with them, you can just buy the books. The Emotional Thesaurus is the first one, I believe they have like 6 or 7 now, and you could really hone in on specific things. That if you're really interested in emotional wounds, they have a book about that. One of my favorites is the Occupation Thesaurus, because they really dive into how jobs can bring out conflict and characterization and stuff like that, which I never really thought about until it was right there. So I don't believe those books are super expensive. You can get the ebook edition, or if you like, to make notes and everything, the paperbacks are really nice as well.
Yeah, so I kind of wanted to hop off back at the writing and like the editing, but it's not at all about that, but it's similar. I don't know. But one thing that I would say is studying other people's writing. And I don't mean to copy another writer's writing style or sentence, any of that. I'm not for that. But if, for instance, if I'm having trouble improving in, say, my character's dialogue, and it's just coming across very stilted and I can't understand, like, really. First of all, there's other things online you can study, but say you have an author on your shelves that you really think that their dialogue is really, really great. You can study and look and see how they structure their dialogue and how they do it to make it feel more natural. And maybe that can like hit a light bulb in your head, like, oh, I'm using way too many dialogue tags, or I'm not using enough dialogue tags, or, my characters are speaking like they're 1920s British men when they're in their current day. So I think it can just kind of help if it's just how they do it, and because you resonated with it, and maybe it can help you see where you're going wrong so that you can improve it, not by any means copying it, but just helping to improve it. But there's also, I think we've talked about that before on the Writer's Hive, and Kate has talked at length about the Dialogue Doctor for dialogue and things like that. And there are so many great resources. Like they said, Authortube online. The Dialogue Doctor is free on YouTube if you just want to watch some videos there. So there's so many resources.
Yeah, Jeff Elkins is really great. I worked with him for a little bit just on one of my books, and then I was also on the channel. And I just find the perspective so different. So he came through he works in at like a simulation. I don't know what it's called, but so he writes basically dialogue for people to take part in this simulation. Usually it's for training purposes, for like law enforcement and stuff. So I found it really helpful when I had like a police character in my book and stuff. And he's just really great. So I would definitely recommend checking him out. You can also like follow his Patreon as well, if you just want to get a good look. But I believe it's the Dialogue Daisy was what he originally called it. That really was like a moment for me. So, like I said, even though, I've been writing and publishing since 2013. I'm always still learning. So I hope you don't feel like if you're just starting off that it's impossible, because you're going to learn in this process. You're going to learn with every book you do, that you write, and every book that you publish. So it's a lifelong process, and I would never say anyone should stop learning at any point, because we can always improve.
I agree. It's we talked about 1,000 hours to become an expert, but really when it comes to writing, you should never strive to be an expert. You should always strive to continue to learn continue to grow and improve your writing.
Absolutely. A little bit separate from this is also one of the ways that I think I've improved my writing is understanding who I'm writing to and what their expectations are. So while you don't necessarily need to write to market, there is a certain expectation in different markets. So if I'm writing a fantasy, it's going to have a different expectation for my storyline, plot, and characters than if I'm writing a romance. And understanding those genres, understanding what your readers want. Nobody's hoping to put through all of this work to publish a book and then have poor reader feedback. So understanding what readers expect in a genre is really important. And then you can play with it. We're not saying you have to follow it to a T, but understanding that a romance usually ends or should end with a happy ever after. Understanding that fantasy, it needs to have like some ebb and flow of action and character engagement and plot. So there is a certain amount of research that should go into the genre that you're writing, even if you plan on bending it. Understanding what the expectations are for that genre is super important to improving your writing, as opposed to just kind of going in blind. I did that with my first book. Is I just kind of went in blind and then realized that I wasn't meeting a lot of the expectations for what my readers would want, and had to rework it, because obviously at the end of the day, I want them to enjoy the book that I'm putting forward. So I would say definitely know who you're writing to and what their expectations are.
Yeah, and I agree totally with that, because it's just important to know whether, tropes or certain, pacing and everything like that. Like, usually, I mean, most people, unless it's a romantic suspense, don't want like a really pacey romance novel. Like usually it's a little bit slower and slow. Well, I guess it depends on the trope if it's slow burn, but knowing all of that, because there are instances where if you don't hit the mark, whether it's in your writing or the marketing of the book, the readers will tell you. They will tell you all about it in the reviews. And I'm not saying, you should read like every single fantasy book out there, but you should probably read many of them. And, if you're able to write down things that you like about those books, things that you don't like about those books, you can really start to deconstruct your own process. And then, as Julie said, if you want to bend it, you really have to know the rules first, or else it may seem like it's coming out of left field for a lot of readers, because readers love to read in their genre and they want to pick up a book and love it. No one really goes into a book expecting to be like confused or angry, which I've been about many books that like sort of didn't fit in the genre. So yeah, that's my advice on that one.
I had something to add to it and now I have forgotten, which is fun. But I think that to a lot of new writers, when you first start out writing, you just first think about getting the writing out. You don't necessarily think about improving it. So once you switch over to improving, I think it's just very important, like Kate said, just I forget where I was going, but
the rules,
but what Kate said, I agree.
Reading the rules.
Yeah.
We concur all around.
Yes.
Yeah, the rules, like you shouldn't strive to be the exception until you've learned how to be the rule, is what I think I was going for. There you go.
It's a very succinct way of saying it. I'm going to get to a couple of these questions that I see, because we do have a couple sitting there. So let's get to a couple of these and then maybe we'll spark some other conversations. So our first one, Six Cats Press. When is the time that you find best to let someone else into your story? After the first edit, second edit? I like to get feedback, but sometimes I can't see the forest for the trees in my edits.
I think this is definitely individual. For me specifically, I do the first draft, a self edit, and then I go to critique partners, and then I edit again, possibly go back to critique partners, and then my actual editor. So I do a lot of the upfront work, because when you pay for an editor, you want to make sure it's the best it can be, because you don't want them like really looking at a first draft if possible. Because because you're probably just going to waste your money at that point. So that's, for me, I do just one self-edit before I let other people look. And for me, that process sort of was born out of like gut feelings. So I'm always like, usually I talk to Julie about this a lot. When I hate the book, I need to give it to someone else to look at because it means I've been in it too long, or I can't, like, as you said, you can't see the forest for the trees. So I guess when you have that feeling, maybe it's time for someone else to take a look.
Yeah, I agree. I think it really depends on the person and on the book itself, because each book is going to be different. Me personally, I am more of a discovery writer or a pantser, so I would never want to subject someone to the craziness that is my first drafts, because I will figure out the story, or I'll figure out a different way of doing something and just switch gears in the middle of it. It would make no sense to another person. So minimum, before I would let anybody read it, I would have to do one full self-edit and probably a second. So for me personally, I would probably not until like my third draft to let someone see it. But if you're someone that's a planner and you're someone that's super clean with your first draft, like, you might feel comfortable showing your first draft to someone. I think it like Kate said, it just depends on the person. But for me personally, at least second or third draft, because nobody needs to see that.
I agree. As Kate was saying, you really want to maximize the people that you're utilizing to help you along your writing process, whether that's critique partners, beta readers, or paid editors. And the more that you can get it clean, the cleaner you can get it before you hand it off, the less they're going to focus on that comma or this punctuation error. And the more they're going to be able to focus on the broader scope of your book. And once those things are cleaned up, because a lot of the times you'll get people that focus on these little tiny details, and you're like, well, I need this picture. But if that's cleaned up beforehand, you're really saving everybody a little bit of trouble. So I subscribe to Kate's when I hate it, it's got to go kind of method. And like, I'm getting so frustrated. She's like, Julie, let it go. And I was like, you're right. I'm gonna step back. I can't do any more right now. I'm sick of looking at it. It's time for somebody else to take a look. So it's somewhat intuitive, but you want to try to get it as clean as you can. So
I think it's also valid what people say to give it some time to breathe before you look at it again. And I think that a lot of people that end up getting frustrated is because they're not giving enough space in between when they wrote it and when they're looking at it. Because I've gone back and read stuff that I only wrote part of the first draft, and I'm like, oh, this isn't as bad as it was in my head. And now I could edit this with a different perspective than I could have before. So either walk away for a little bit and come back and see, and then if you still feel ready, then otherwise just give it to somebody to critique, because if you're that frustrated, it's not going to do anybody any good.
I agree. We also have a couple other questions. Let's see. Sorry, my comments just jumped on me.
I've added some in the starred ones, Julie, so.
Perfect. Favorite character you never thought you would make due to these improvements? Ooh. Yeah. So particularly in A Curse and Ash, my very, very early drafts of that were, first of all, YA, second of all, much more contemporary. And one of my main love interests, Brynock, my Dark Fae Prince, was maybe there for like 5 minutes. And Amber was like, no. We need more. We need more of this guy.
Like, who's that? I need more of that, please.
Can I have that, please? And I was like, yeah, sure. Let's rework this. So that's definitely a character that was not at all in my first draft of the book, that came through different iterations and, critique partner feedback. Anybody else?
I think that any characters that I'm probably surprised that showed up because I had improved my writing and was able to finally write them is any villain in my story, any antagonist. I feel like I think when I was younger, I'd only read a lot of books that necessarily didn't have a lot of antagonists, or just like one like Disney evil type of villain. And so the intricacies of the villain's perspective and things that, had I not worked on improving my writing, I don't think I could have ever truly formed something that was more than just an evil stereotype.
I would definitely jump in to say that too. More specifically in the Life After series, my debut, it was a YA paranormal series. One of the villain was that mustache twirling type of villain, and it took an interesting perspective from my editor at the time to sort of turn this character into something so much more. And there's sort of that gray character. They're not necessarily a villain, but not necessarily a hero is either. And I took that advice I still use that advice because I think it's important when it comes to writing like an antagonist and protagonist relationship and conflict. I always think of like my antagonist as like a path that my protagonist could take. So I try to make them similar but different. You know, you could say one could go like the light side, one could go to the dark side, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're all light or all dark. And I really love exploring the intricacies of my characters in that way to say like, I always love when I read a villain character, an antagonist, where I'm like, oh, I kind of get why they did that. And I'm like, I should hate this person. But I always love that. And I love to try to put that in my writing as well.
Yeah, I think the biggest example that I've seen lately in like popular media that people understand when I tell them how I feel is the Black Panther movie. The main villain in that movie, when he talks about his reasons, you agree with him. You're like, you're completely correct. That is wrong, and you're valid. You just went about it the wrong way, my guy. You know, and I think that's probably the one thing that kind of like when I tell people that, they're like, oh yeah, and I'm like, because he's the hero of his own story. He's trying to do good things. He just isn't doing it what he thinks is the right way, you know?
Absolutely. I love this next question. So let's get into it. What is the best way to describe somewhere you haven't been? I've admittedly self-diagnosed aphantasia. Welcome. Sames. So imagining things gets really hard for me. My best fiction is set in places I've been. As somebody with aphantasia, which we often talk about in the Writer's Hive videos, because I'm the only of the trio that deals with that, I use Pinterest a lot. I use different online Google Maps or Google Earth, or I know real estate listings for houses. I literally last night was looking up Pinterest and real estate listings and helping me look at, you know, this is the kind of town vibe I want. And I'll look up like pictures for small town main streets or whatever it might be. I use a lot of photo inspiration. So I will have private Pinterest boards for all of my stories. And then I will sometimes import those. I use Scrivener, so I'll sometimes import those into my actual Scrivener document. So I have them right there as I'm drafting. And I use photo inspiration a lot because I can't see it in my head. So I'll still make it my own and try to paint that world with my words. But photo inspiration becomes huge. Google Earth. So if you're writing in a country you've never been to, you know, I actually just looked up a video of a drive between like the airport and then like a location in a country that I've been to but couldn't remember. And so it's literally just somebody vlogging a drive so I can kind of look at what was around me. The internet is amazing now. It wouldn't have been that easy a while ago, but right now there's probably a vlog or a video or pictures of everything that you need to see. So I would utilize those aspects. And I know the girls have other things that they use as well, but that's personally, I have to use pictures for everything.
I mean, you covered a lot of them that I use. I don't have aphantasia, but in my earlier books, I would get confused like a floor plan, like I wouldn't explain it properly, or I'd put someone in a room that they weren't supposed to be in based on the floor plan. So along with Google Maps, I actually based a whole town on a real place that I found on Google Maps for one of my series. But I used like the exact streets, obviously different names and stuff like that. So that was really fun. Yeah, so I use Google Maps. I use Zillow for the houses, and I forget that you can look them up online. Usually it's like if you want to build a house, like you go to like find floor plans, you know, and usually, you know, people would pay to get the floor plan, like all the specs and everything. But I like to look at it for like the house or the building, and then like where all the rooms are. So then I can map out, you know, the movement of my characters throughout that space. Also too, which will probably never see the light of day, but I like to create them in The Sims, create the houses and stuff, and sort of look at that part. That sort of like triggers some inspiration for me, and just to think about the story and have like a dedicated time to think about it. And then, you know, sometimes I find that characters can't really move through the space, or it doesn't really fit to my vision of the story. So then I tweak based on that.
So I do a lot of similar things. So Google, like Street View and Google Earth, have been something that elevated it for me to be able to see it. And actually, I tested this out myself because I actually was going to Paris a few years ago, and I was like, I'm going to see, you know, if I can use Google like Maps and Google Street View, and then kind of also when I go, if what I wrote and like what I felt about it, if it was feasible, like if it felt right. And I did a pretty good job, I think. But one example of just winging it that I have is when I wrote my first novel ever back in like 2011. And it was a vampire novel about a girl from Dallas that goes on vacation in Ireland and meets a vampire. And I wrote this girl like coming out of the airport, like out of the doors, and just saw rolling hills, which isn't a thing from any airport. And now when I read it, it's funny because it was before the time when like Google Street View was very good and everything. So now I understand. It was before I'd ever traveled. I'd never flown on a plane. Now it's different. So one of the things that I would suggest is if you possibly can, to go to the place. Especially with aphantasia, it's going to be harder for you to really picture it if you can't see it. Like I tried to do it off of pictures before. Sometimes it helps. Sometimes you see a picture that looks like Central Park goes on forever and ever, and then you go to New York, and you go to the top of the rock, and you're like, oh, that's not how it is. It doesn't go on forever and ever. It's pretty small, actually. But I also use Zillow and look up floor plans. I'd love to know exactly where my characters are in their space, so that if I one time say they turn left to go to the bathroom or to the kitchen, and then the next time they turn right to go to the bathroom or kitchen, I'm like, that doesn't work. So I've actually made my own. I've actually drawn floor plans for myself, for my characters, based off of ones that I found online. That really helps. But if you can, or even if you have a friend that's been to that place, maybe pick their brain and ask, like, so if I was to go to London and I was at the London Museum and I wanted to go to the Ferris wheel, how long would that have take me, and kind of how is the situation walking? Can you walk it? Do you need to take some kind of public transit to get there? Which I can tell you definitely need to take public transit because I've done it now, but stuff like that is what I would suggest, especially with aphantasia. I have the opposite problem. I see too vividly, and it's hard to find things that match what's in my head. But yeah, I think those are all good, really good ones to do.
It looks like there's also Google Scholar here, which does virtual tours of different places, which would be really cool if you were going through like a museum or something. I'm sure there's different tours of things. Very nice. I'm trying to see what else we have. Somebody else also does Sims. Very nice. Sorry, I'm trying to get the comments were jumping on me.
You're muted. Did you say
Sorry,
something?
I just said I don't have the patience for Sims unless I have some sort of cheat that I could have unlimited money. I don't have the patience.
Motherload.
I have that written in one of my notebooks, but I've never tried it.
I write fantasy and sci-fi written in places that don't exist, so I can't use Google Maps or anything but my own imagination and or composed from various sources. Yes, absolutely. Again, I think Pinterest is a great one for that, because even if I'm just writing something and I'm like, I want fantasy aesthetic or, what medieval aesthetics, you can still find some kind of picture inspiration if that's what you're looking for. Other people just have it all in their noggins.
Yeah.
They know already, which is fantastic.
You can also open like Microsoft Paint and draw it out with circles and things just to kind of map out where planets are or what, write little tidbits about each of the planets just so that you have your own map,
Absolutely. If you have any other questions, let us know. I'm going to look at my document, see if we had any other ideas that we wanted to talk about.
I think we'd be remiss to mention actual craft books. I don't think we really talked about that.
No, we didn't.
Specifically. When it comes to writing craft, like the actual technical writing, I can't think of many. I can't think of any at the top of my head, but obviously there's the standard. If you're an outliner, Save the Cat, then you have Save the Cat Writes a Novel, and I think they're coming out with another one. You could look at, there's Bird by Bird. They're all escaping my brain at the moment, Julie, if you want to jump in. Oh, there we go. That's my favorite. How did I forget that one? Mastering Suspense, Structure, and Plot was phenomenal.
Goal, Motivation, Conflict.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Goal is GMC by Deborah Dixon.
GMC.
That's more writing craft than like outlining or anything. But Mastering Suspense, Structure, and Plot, it's not just for suspense writers or thriller writers. I don't know. It changed my life. Just the concept that she talks about in that book is it just blew me away. And I believe at the end, the second section is more writing craft. Correct me if I'm wrong, Amber. It's a smaller section, but the upfront is just phenomenal. I loved it.
Yes. Yeah,
those are my two favorites. That I have so many of them. And I even have this one because I was writing a romance. I even have this one. Dummies books. If you guys haven't gotten the Dummies books, like, they're amazing. They actually break things down very simply. They give you cheat sheets. They have, like, you can see I have like tabs. Like, they're actually pretty good. But that one is just for romance. The other two are my favorites for just in general.
I also, at the beginning of the panorama, invested in masterclass. There are so many different authors and options for masterclasses. If you look online, there's also usually different functions where, like, authors will talk, give speeches online, especially virtually right now. So if you can look at author interviews or who was it? I think Kay Ankrum worked with somebody to do like a free session on different things. Dawn Kurtage did one on writing horror, and they're free to attend. You usually have to register, but a lot of them are free to attend. Some of them require like a purchase of something, but there are a lot where you can actually hear authors talk about their process as well, which can also help you. So those are options as well.
Yeah, on masterclass, don't only try to watch authors because you like their genre. One of the most valuable ones that I found was, I forget his name, but he writes like crime thrillers, which are not my thing at all, but he had such good content and advice on there. I probably, like, if any of them, that one was my favorite, and it's not who I would have. It's only because I paid for like just the whole month and I was trying to get in as many as I could, but otherwise I wouldn't have picked him. And he was actually really, really good at teaching.
I loved Shonda Rhimes as well. She talks about screenwriting, so that's not specific to, novel writing, but the principles that she talked about with storytelling were just phenomenal. I think I've watched that one like 3 times already because I just love her. And she is like, she just dominates when it comes to, being a part of the TV industry. So definitely check out other ones, storytelling specifically, specific ones, not just, actual writers.
Absolutely. And again, that's a monetary thing, but they often run specials. So, keep an eye out. Hello, Victoria. Do you have any personal measurements on when your writing has improved, indicators / feelings? When my editors come back with less things that are wrong and more praise, when my critique partners say that, like, my character development, a lot of it is feedback based. Because I always have that imposter syndrome where I always think that it's not great. So when I get some external feedback, it really does kind of come, for me at least, in that area where I know I'm strengthening when somebody else can kind of mention it, because I don't usually see it for myself.
Yeah, I was going to base mine off feedback as well, especially as I mentioned before, when editors say your work is clean, that's like a really good indicator that like you're doing better. Because, you know, probably for my first 10 books, no one ever said that. But, you know, a little bit after that, I started getting that note from my editors when it came to like copy edits and proofreading and stuff. Yeah, so critique partners and the like. But I don't specifically have any feelings about that. But I'd be interested to see what Amber has to say.
I say go back and read something you wrote 5 years ago. It will immediately tell you if your writing has gotten better, because when I go back and read some of my first ones, it's so like, what was I thinking? And I'm like, I've definitely improved. Like, I immediately know I've definitely improved. But what they said as well, my critique partners, other people that can tell you like, oh, this is definitely getting cleaner. This is definitely getting better. But yeah, read that first one, especially. You'll see it. Also, it was David Balducci, if everybody was wondering.
I just saw, yeah.
Yeah, I keep seeing people saying, is it he? I just remember.
Is it
David
Patterson?
Balducci.
Is it? And I'm like, Dan Brown. I'm like, it was neither of those.
Dan Brown he was pretty good, but David Balducci had some really great advice.
Yeah, he did. It was very good. No, I felt like, what was Patterson? He's like, I shadowed an FBI agent. I'm like, not everybody can do that, buddy.
When he writes on a legal pad as well.
Yeah, I'm like,
it has someone else type it for him. So,
yeah. But we are going to start wrapping up because we want to get to Kate's. So any last questions, and then I'm going to let everybody kind of do their outros, tell us where they can find themselves. But links are down below. So I'm just going to look through the rest of the comments really quickly. If somebody wants to take over, maybe point them to the writer's Hive, you can do that while I just double check the comments.
Yeah, I'll jump in just in case I have to jump off. But if you look at the publishing track of the Authortube Writing Conference, I am next up at 1 o'clock Eastern time. That is pre-recorded because as an introvert, I could not do 2 lives in a row just for my social battery. So I will be in the comments throughout the whole presentation if you want to ask questions throughout. So I'm really excited. It's all about writing and publishing systems to open yourself up to creating more if you get all of the technical stuff in place. So you can also find me here on YouTube if in the comments, or in you have all the links in the description anyway. Feel free to follow me there, and you can go to my website katlynduncan.com, KATLYNDUNCAN.com, to check out my books and my upcoming books.
Yeah, but we also have a new Writer's Hive channel. If it's also linked down below, where we are putting it's going to be bi-weekly for new episodes starting next week. We're currently pulling in some of our backlist, but if you haven't watched them, then they're new to you. So but every other week we'll have a full episode, and then the other opposite week we will have just a short highlights if you only have 2 to 6 minutes to watch instead of the full 15 to 20, 30-minute ones sometimes. But we have really good advice on there, I think. I think they're really good stuff. We talk about everything from writing to publishing to, inspiration, writer's block, everything. And if you want to join it, like Julie had said earlier, there is a link down below in the videos where you can go and fill out a thing and you can be a guest, or you can send in questions and we can answer them in a video. But I think that if you we want to try to make a writing community and really help each other out. And, it doesn't have to be a solitary thing. So.
Nope, nor should it. And I'm JulieZantopoulos. You can find me at JulieZee.com. Again, links down below. A Curse and Ash is my first book. It's currently on sale for under $10 on Amazon for the paperback if you want to read it before book 2 comes out. Book 2, A Prophecy in Ash, just had a cover reveal, and pre-orders are up, I think right now only at Amazon and Barnes & Noble, but they are up. And I think that's about everything. We're going to go get prepped and ready for Kate's. And thank you for joining us for the first Authortube Writing Conference. We had a great time. There's been some amazing panels, amazing sessions. Don't forget to fill out your feedback forms for some prizes. There's a lot of prizes, and some of them are really, really fantastic. So make sure you're doing that. If you have any thoughts, comments, or questions after this, and you're watching this after it goes live, please do leave them down below. We will get back to you for sure. thank you so much for joining us today. I think we're good. Yeah.
Thanks for hanging out with us.
Yeah. Bye, everybody.
Bye.